Welcome all nerds, my name is the nerdy guy Trey Staton, here with another ranking video for Star Wars, which definitely won't be controversial at all. Before I get started, I want to say thank you for all of the subscribers so far. It has meant a lot. I'm kind of a small channel. If you like my videos, rankings, let's plays, solo plays, board game reviews, anything nerdy, please hit that subscribe button. Check out my other videos. I'm really trying to, get past the bump of 100 subscribers, so please make my dream come true. I'm not trying to be the next PewDiePie or anything, but I would love to get a community of nerds where we can all express interest in everything we do. So, with that being said, let's get started. Now, before I officially rank them, I want to give you the basis of what I'm personally basing all of these rankings on. Now, first, I want to say that this list will be controversial. It will not be a typical list, so please just wait for my reasoning on these specific reasons why I personally think that movies are certainly above others. And these are the factors that I'm taking into consideration. First, the originality of the plot. I think that's very important in Star Wars. Sometimes it can kind of get redundant, and I really give a lot of credit to movies that seem really original, even if they weren't necessarily better as far as quality or dialogue or things like that. As long as it's original concept, I think that's very important. Star Wars can kind of get repetitive in that same light, as well as the second issue of if the movie seems to be a little less, oh, here's all the good guys and here's all the bad guys, and there's no morally gray characters. Han Solo was kind of this morally gray character, and I liked him for that, but he seemed to be the only one in the whole story. And yes, you could say Luke battled the dark side and everything like that, but as Rey, especially as time went on, it just seemed like, oh yeah, she went straight to the dark, but she only does good things. So it really, it says one thing, does another. I'm really just looking for morally complex characters, and honestly, just not characters, but the overall rebellion's not so good and the Empire's not so bad. They have some reasonings, and I'm just kind of sick of the good versus evil. We're all humans. Another thing is memorable moments. So they have to have memorable moments. I have to think back to that movie and say, oh my gosh, like that moment from that movie was so good. If that gets factors in, that gets some points on my list. Also some kid nostalgia. So I didn't grow up, I'm in my mid-20s, I didn't grow up in the original trilogy. Luke has always been Darth Vader's son, and seeing that reveal in theaters, I probably would have a different perspective on the older trilogies. But I don't, my kid nostalgia is from the prequels, which don't get me wrong, they're still bad, but one movie in particular I kind of have that kid nostalgia for. And last but not least, keeping up with the lore. Now, I'm not a big book reader myself. I don't know, the ins and outs of every book and every minor character, but I do know some things, and especially keeping up with kind of the Jedi lore of, they need to have kids. Jedis don't have kids. So the whole thing with Rey's parents, it just seemed kind of, why it shouldn't be Luke's daughter, it shouldn't be all that stuff. Kind of keep to the lore because the Jedi aren't supposed to have kids. So with that being said, I know that the movies, before you stop me, I know that the movies said that Rey's parents are nobodies, but come on, we all know it. The 9th movie is going to say something different. So with that being said, let's get into this list. All right, number 10 coming in last place is, drumroll, The Force Awakens. Let me try and posture this. Yes, starting very controversial. So, The Force Awakens. Before you get all in a tizzy, let me tell you why. I went into The Force Awakens thinking, oh, this is gonna be a new, bright, great movie. Thinking, oh, I can't wait for this trilogy, and it turned out to be the most unoriginal movie I could ever come up with. I felt like I was watching the exact replica of A New Hope. Rey as a character just seemed like she was this most overpowered Jedi, barely has no training with the Force, and can take on Kylo Ren and actually defeat him, even though, yes, you could say he was injured, but come on. She has no training with the Force. Are you kidding me? So J.J. Abrams also posed questions that just could not be answered. You know, who is Ray's parents? You know, you really didn't get, every time I thought back to that, I was like, no, it couldn't be this person. No, it couldn't be this person. Like, it didn't make sense other than if it was Palpatine's, you know. So he was bringing up all these questions that there was a lot of others that you know just didn't make any logical sense. They were fun to think about, but in the lore, it just kind of ripped open the lore. There was a third Death Star. I was just like, are you kidding me? A third Death Star? A third Death Star? Are you kidding me? It just wasn't a new idea. Han's death was kind of a disservice. You could see that coming a mile away, you know, and he fell down another chasm. Like, are you kidding me? He had to die on another freaking falling chasm. Are you kidding me? So overall, you know, it was just a shot-by-shot remake of The New Hope. I felt like it really had nothing going for it other than some likable characters, but for it to be such an unoriginal idea and to pose questions that really kind of hindered in The Last Jedi, I feel like I really have to put this last on my list. Yes, it was entertaining at times, you know, you got some humor, but for such I would take a bad plot, but have it to be an original plot, then, you know, a humorous, you know, kind of well-conceived plot that kind of just rips off the same exact movie from A New Hope. I'd much rather just have a complete new plot than something that was, you know, cooked and baked to be the same. I know you guys won't agree, but I would love to hear your thoughts to change my mind on The Force Awakens, because to this day I still cannot stand that movie. So, with that being said, let's go to number 9. And number 9, I will kind of go with the heap. I cannot get my hands right on this one. Number 9, I will go with Attack of the Clones. Now, Attack of the Clones kind of goes in that subject matter of it is just a boring movie. You could say it doesn't get boring once the actual war starts, you know, but it is just so long of Anakin whining and being in love and, you know, man, and it's just so much of just his. It's like watching a teenager grow up, and nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to deal with that much teenage angst. And the Padme relationship just wasn't, it was at its worst in that movie, and it really just didn't have anything that kind of was memorable in it. You know, you could have started and finished that movie, and all you need to know is that Padme and Anakin fell in love. You know, that's how honestly I felt. Like, nobody really important died other than the Fett, you know. So I feel like you could have went through the whole trilogy and just skipped that movie. Honestly, I just feel like you could have went from the first one and third one and said Padme's in love with Anakin and they're in a relationship, and you'd be like, all right, I'm caught up. There was just nothing enjoyable about it other than, you know, a couple lightsaber duels and Yoda flopping around, but really I didn't get a whole lot from that movie. I feel like you guys probably be in agreement with me that it belongs lower on this list. With that being said, number 8, The Phantom Menace. Maybe I'll go this side. Phantom Menace. So The Phantom Menace, I love the pod racing, that's why it's above these two. I actually enjoyed kind of the politicking of this. People kind of said that taxes were kind of boring. I kind of liked that it was kind of political maneuvering in the beginning. It kind of reminded me of Game of Thrones in the beginning, you know, a lesser Game of Thrones. So, I kind of enjoyed that, and the young story of Anakin. It was kind of a brighter Star Wars movie for the time. And yes, you had Jar Jar. You know, I don't like Jar Jar, but I don't understand the hate Jar Jar gets, you know? He's not my favorite character by any means, but, you know, just so much hate for him, I don't really understand it. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I don't know. He was a silly character, and, you know, when I saw that movie when I was such a young kid, I think I was 6 at the time, or 5, Jar Jar was a funny character to me, you know. As an adult, yeah, he's insufferable to watch, but as a kid, meh, he was funny. What can I say? I liked him. So if you're a kid watching it around that time, yeah, sure, I liked it above Attack of the Clones and above, you know, the ripoff of A New Hope. so that's why it belongs on this list. Enough said. With that being said, now I will go to The Last Jedi. Now, I am a big defender of... Last Jedi. So, with that being said, I am a big defender of The Last Jedi. I think The Last Jedi kept with the lore as best as it could have with A New Hope. Rey's parents had to have been nobody. And I like the themes that it tackled, especially with Luke saying that they looked at the overall perspective of the Jedi and the Sith. The total good rises evil, and then from evil rises good, and then from good rises evil. And these are kind of gray concepts that you could have explored. I really liked that. I wish they would have tackled more on that. But finally, we kind of got the talk that I kind of wanted, where people were kind of in this gray Jedi type of idealistic. That, the Jedi were so strict that it caused the Sith, with their rules, that it caused the Sith. And the Sith, were so evil that it caused just so much good. And it's good, we're all human. It kind of tackled the human moments. But with that being said, Canto Bight, they ran out of fuel. It was very boring. The plots didn't make sense with Holdo's plan and the whole light speed into ships caused a whole nerd debacle there. But I thought some of the things were clever, and at least it was its own story, which is why it's above The Force Awakens. I just hated how The Force Awakens was the same thing as A New Hope. So yeah, that's why The Last Jedi is above this list. And hopefully The Last Jedi gets a little bit, more love. I'm not asking you to think it's your favorite movie, but try and explore the concepts that it was tackling, some bigger issues and trying to answer some of the questions that the Force Awakens posed that just couldn't make any sense, So it did the best with what it had. Number 6 on my list, Solo. So Solo I watched that really late, actually. I think I saw that a couple months ago. And it was a very, I guess, popcorn movie. It wasn't bad per se, but it wasn't interesting. Like, things were entertaining and enjoyable, but they weren't memorable, I guess. I can't really remember too much about this movie. I really thought that there was going to be more to the story because I love the other one-off series. And the list of characters were pretty forgettable, actually. I expected more from a lot, and then the end scene with Amelia... I expected more from a lot. I expected more from the overall arc and the overall story. And Amelia Clark's character at the end kind of confused me with our little Darth Molly. So I'm still trying to figure out what's going on there. But overall, it was kind of just a boring movie. It had some entertaining moments, and it was definitely a popcorn movie. It kept me entertained, so that's why it's kind of middle on this list. But it didn't have anything memorable, and honestly, I have no reason to rewatch it, I guess. So for that being said, time for the top 5. And number 5 on my list is The Return of the Jedi. Now you might be thinking, oh no, the original is so low on this list. Well, there's a reason for that. I'm thinking that the Emperor leaking his actual shield generator on Endor to take it down as a trap for the rebels was kind of the dumbest move the Emperor ever could have done. It didn't make quite as much sense. It just seemed like a reason for the good guys to win. And the more I think about it, I really didn't like that. I didn't like how dumb the Emperor was kind of towards the end. And yeah, I guess that's all I really have to say about this. It had some memorable moments, great space battle and battle at the end, its time. It had a second Death Star, but at least it was a little bit different. you're trying to do something on the ground before you could attack it in space. Things like that. It dealt with Luke and the dark side, and I thought it was a good conclusion to the Luke, Darth Vader, Emperor saga, at least. And honestly, every movie in the top 5 I would rewatch as many times as needed. I have no problem. They're all entertaining. They're all good for me. And it's really a 50-50 list because everything below the top 5 I think is kind of a poor movie. So I really enjoyed it. I can't tell you the last time I actually rewatched Return of the Jedi. I think it's been a while, but I think the Yoda scene makes me cry every time. So I really love Yoda. He's my boy. And with that being said, I will move on. So, number 4. Revenge of the Sith. So, there isn't a whole lot to say about this movie, except for that end battle scene, though. That will forever be my favorite battle scene of all time, and this is where my kid nostalgia comes in. I remember watching this as a kid, and I just fell in love with it. There's some things about it that are definitely bad. I might not deserve as high as I put it on this list, and you guys might give me flack for it, but I really enjoyed this movie. And it kind of this was the movie for me as a kid. I really enjoyed it. I felt like there was a lot to it. I loved the betrayal, the Order 66, and kind of everything was making its move from the prequels. I definitely think it's the best of the prequel movies. And it had a lot to it with Anakin, dying. I thought Padme dying from however she died and Anakin killing her was kind of weird and didn't make much sense to me. Kind of seemed like, even though we've done some good character building to lead Anakin to the dark side, it just kind of felt like a complete 180 at that time. Not as much as Daenerys, don't get me wrong, but just to kill Padme, I feel like that specific action was kind of a 180. Didn't make much sense to me. I still don't really get it, but hey, it was an entertaining movie for me. Kid nostalgia, it'll be number 4. Number 3, Empire Strikes Back. Oof. Oof, 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 oof. I can tell you guys are angry already. So Empire Strikes Back. Why did I not put this as number 1? I know this is a lot of people's favorite movie. It has the Luke, I am your father scene in it, most iconic. It has the Yoda training. It has a lot more. It's the only one that doesn't have a Death Star, and for that, it's really hard for me not to put it on the top of this list, but I will tell you why it doesn't beat the other two when I get there. Basically, all I can say for this movie is I felt as though the beginning and end of it had a lot of meat to it, but in the overall picture, I felt like there wasn't much effect on the plot. I guess that's why it's not number 2 or number 1 for me. I felt at the end of the day, if you realistically look at the end of 4 and the beginning of 6, things kind of turn out bad for our heroes at the end of it, but it mostly felt like they're all in still one piece. Luke lost an arm, whatever, but it just kind of felt like a movie that, I will grant you, for a midway movie, it's one of the best of all time, but in the same sense, I kind of want something finite to my ending of a movie. Just me personally, I do. So for this, to make it number 1, it just can't do that for me. Very few movies like that can. Infinity War is one of the few that could be a midway movie, and for me to rank it so high. So Empire's definitely top notch. Number 2, what will it be? Drumroll. The New Hope. So A New Hope is definitely, I think it is number 2, and it beats Empire because for its time, it was a completely new idea, and you have to think about that. I hate people. I don't hate people. I don't hate anyone. But I don't like it when people make the argument that, oh, they built on the foundations and made it better. Well, there wasn't any foundations to begin with this movie to make it better in the first place. You had to build the foundation. And I think A New Hope, for the time it had, it was the ultimate space opera for the time. It was, a young boy coming from a farmland. We didn't know anything about it. That was all set up from the beginning. Coming from nowhere to go on this great adventure with friends, to realize he was a Jedi, and to become the hero at the end of the day that saves everyone from a Death Star that has never been seen on screen before. And it had so many themes to it for it to be created as a fresh movie that I just fell in love with it as a kid. I really remember this being the original movie of the originals that I fell in love with out of all Star Wars, honestly. That and the Revenge of the Sith. And so it has everything for me, honestly. It has impact to the story. It has originality. It kind of goes a little bit too much with he's all good and he's all bad, and Empire kind of dwells in that side of it that New Hope doesn't. But for the time's sake that they had to create all of this universe and everything, it has to go above Empire for me. I'm sorry. Just for me personally, it has to go above Empire. And number one, the one that I'm probably going to take the most time talking about, because you guys are going to be furious with me, is Rogue One. Now, I have a lot of reasons for this. Every one of the movies on my list, you had to have, lightsaber battles and things like that to make it exciting, and you kind of ignored some of the cheesy dialogue and some of the plot holes and things like that. I went into Rogue One, and for a Star Wars movie, I love to pick out plot holes. But for a Star Wars movie that has some of the biggest plot holes in it, it took me a really long time to try and find at least one plot hole in that movie. Some said, oh, you don't need the tower to be tilted right at, a ship to convey data with it. And I'm thinking, if that's the biggest plot hole you can find in a movie, you got to give it to the writers there, where they patched up some things. You could say, oh, he should have landed way closer in the beginning. It's the nitty-gritty things. There's no major things. And tell me in the comment section if you find a major plot hole with Rogue One. I will stop you here. It didn't need a Jedi in the movie to be a good movie. I fell in love with the characters. I liked that they sacrificed themselves. And you know what? I loved, above all, the themes of good and evil in this film. I love that in the beginning, Cassian shoots his own informant. That just brought me into the movie. I was like, oh, the rebels aren't all good. They've had to do some bad things to stop the Empire. And that's what I love seeing in TV movies and genre, is that, you fall in love with the hero versus the villain, but the reason I fell in love with Game of Thrones is everyone is gray. We're all humans, we're all gray. And I don't like when things really predict somebody is completely good or completely evil, because you can't relate with them unless you're a serial killer. I fell in love with these themes, and Rogue One really delivered with it. It had a complex plot. It covered up one of the plot holes in A New Hope, which I liked. It really brought everything together. You could say, some of the characters were meaningless in it. That may be true. But overall, I think the story was well written. It was a Star Wars movie that didn't need Jedi to make it good. And for it having a Death Star in it, it was kind of this exterior threat that you didn't really care about. You kind of knew that it was this overarching threat you couldn't beat. And that was the only kind of movie where you felt like you couldn't beat the Death Star, because you know it's not destroyed there. And so it kind of left this looming threat. And best Darth Vader scene of any Star Wars movie, can we address that? So you could say Tarkin CGI was kind of bad, whatever, I really care about the plot, and for the plot of Rogue One, for it being a solo film, for it to be a completely new idea, and for me to fall in love with the characters, it tackled everything for me that I love. I've rewatched it at least, 20 times at this point, wanting to show it to everyone. I fell in love with the comments. So yes, this is my list.